Monsters of the land. The Loch Ness Monster is known around the world, but Scotland is also home to a number of even more unpleasant creatures that infest dry land. These monsters are rarely seen nowadays, perhaps because people tend to remain within the orbit of the lights of the city streets, or when they do go out at night, it is within the comforting shell of a modern motor vehicle. Except for some hardy hill walkers, few people are out and alone in the real dark to meet creatures such as the terrifying Brolachan. This creature does not venture into towns or villages, but stays in the shaded recesses of the landscape, waiting for the lonely, the vulnerable, and in particular for children. Sometimes it was believed to be part of the fairy world, or it could be the young of the Fuath, a strange web-footed creature that may have mated with the wildest of the Highland clans in the distant and very dim past. It is also possible that humans have seen the Brolachan, but do not recognise it, as it has no definite shape. It is merely a malformed mass of something, even a dark cloud on occasions, but with a pair of bright red eyes watching. It may be less than a metre in width, or a full 2 metres, and apparently it is quite retiring. It dislikes trees, preferring the stark bleakness of the moors, sometimes remaining near water, which would account for the webbed feet of its parents. This creature is best left severely alone. Although shy, it is not harmless. It is a predator that eases its formless being inside a vulnerable victim, either someone who has experienced an emotional upset, or who is depressed, or weak-willed, or especially young. Once inside, the Brolachan will possess its victim and drain the life force from it. The victim must fight back. He or she will become darker as this formless thing is within it. The victim may show wild behaviour patterns, quite out of character, but it will not avail them. Unless the Brolachan is removed, they are doomed. The Brolachan will control them, and will entice another human close, perhaps a friend or relative, and at the very time the host dies, burned out by the power of the creature that possesses him or her, the relative will be emotionally upset and therefore prone to be the next victim, and so the pattern continues. Naturally, people did not like to be possessed by a Brolachan, so they devised methods of driving the creature out of the victim. Unfortunately, many details of the procedure have been lost, so what has come down is fragmented. It appears to be a mixture of an application of various herbs and a ritual of chanting and singing. When the Brolachan eventually emerges, the danger is far from over, as it could immediately seek another host or use its black magic on those who cast it out. Yet the Brolachan was a creature of darkness. It feared bright light or fire. Those weapons worked. So travellers on the stark moors in the north must be aware of any shapeless mass that slithers out of the dark. Look for the bright red predatory eyes and be prepared to shine a torch directly at them and then run. Fast. But the Brolachan was only one creature for the night. Perhaps not surprising given the topography and long dark winters, Scotland has a plethora of myths relating to various types of monsters, creatures, and things that make the night hideously dangerous. Today most people relegate these stories to the confines of fiction, but when the dark fell at 3 in the afternoon and dawn was after 9 the following morning, and the wind moaned through the naked branches of trees, or carried only the mournful bellow of distant deer, or the cry of a hunting wolf, imagination could put flesh on the bones of supernatural fear. There were many types of dangerous creatures that seemed to be peculiar to Scotland. For instance, there was the Bavan-Shi, which was a purely feminine vampire that could be met throughout the Highlands. More specific was the Bes Bulach, a creature that infested the Odal Pass to the west of Kyler on the mystical, magical, unearthly island of Skye. When the first ever road was hacked through here, the road makers were informed that the pass was infested by something that could not be properly defined. It either took the form of a man or a dog, or a man with one leg. The workmen heard its screams and cries in the dark of the night, although there does not seem to be any record of a sighting. There were tales of bodies being found and of travellers being attacked and knocked down. One theory was that this creature was the spirit of a murdered man who was looking for revenge, and it seems to have sucked blood from its victims. Another theory was that the one-legged man was a folk memory of the ancient druid seers, who apparently stood on one leg to peer into the future. Another unpleasant creature was the Sloth, who were also known as the Unforgiven Dead. These creatures were to be avoided at all costs, for they were always savage, and the locals thought of them as fallen angels. The borders also had its share of supernatural creatures. One was the brown man of the moors. Dressed in brown, this red-haired being was said to protect the natural wildlife of the hills and moors, and to attack anybody who dared hurt their charges. They were not to be mistaken for the brownies, who could do good deeds around the house or farm in return for food. There were some who believed the brownies were in fact Covenanters, extreme Presbyterians hunted into the wild places by government forces in the 17th century. The Caer was completely different, and may be a folk memory of an ancient earth goddess. She only appeared in winter, and had a blue face and, like the brown man of the moors, protected animals. It seems she was a personification of a pre-Christian goddess. She had a limited life, being born on Halloween, and walked with a magical staff, which she tapped on the ground. Each tap brought the frost. However, she had a limited life. On the eve of Beltane, she tossed her staff under a holly bush or gorse bush, and returned to stone. Although in some versions she became a young maiden, presumably symbolising the birth of spring. There seem to be no surviving records of people who have actually met these creatures. They existed only in the dark recesses of folk memory, in the words of elderly people as they crowded around the bright flames of the peat fire in the evening, and in the whisper of the wind through the sodden winter heather. There were a number of creatures which had the power to foretell a death. One was a König, which translates as a weeper. She was found in waterfalls and howled to warn the local clan that there was a death coming, or some other terrible event. Very similar was a Ciantich, who was the Argyll version, who also wailed to warn on coming death. The Bodach was another ominous creature, dark and looking like a man. Its appearance also foretold of a death in the family. The Highlands were also home to the Catsi, spiritual or ghostly cats. Some versions have the cats as large as a dog and black in colour. These animals may be a folk memory of the lynx, or perhaps only a black wild cat, a creature that is still seen in Scotland. There was also the Cushi, a green spiritual dog the size of a calf that ghosted the heather slopes hunting for prey. Perhaps the influx of people who tramped the Scottish hills in garish colours and who talk in loud voices was scared off the native supernatural creatures. Or perhaps the beasties are just waiting for the right opportunity to appear again. This chapter will close with a very true story. In 1992, a family of 4 from Edinburgh spent a fortnight's holiday in Glenshee, in the very heart of the island of Arran. This glen, pronounced Glenshee, means a sacred or fairy glen, and is speckled with ancient sites, with an Iron Age fort, a chambered cairn, and a prominent standing stone. The family, Michael and Katie Aitken, not their real names, with 8-year-old Andrew and 2-year-old Helen, lived in a caravan right beside the standing stone, upon which Michael and the children played football. In the evening, Michael would take the children up the hills, while the mother grabbed a couple of hours' peace to herself. As the holiday continued, the children grew weary of the nightly hill walks, and Michael walked alone. Toward the end of the holiday, he wandered as far as Loch Nui and the lower slopes of Ben Nui. When he came back from the hills, Katie asked who was with him. Nobody, he replied, but that night she woke in the caravan to see a tall creature without a face beside the bed. She experienced a feeling of deep foreboding. A few moments before they left for the ferry the following day, Katie broke a tendon in her leg, which still bothers her. Nearly a quarter of a century later, they have not returned. There does not seem to be any specific folklore attached to Loch Nui, but Ben Nui was the scene of a number of aircraft crashes during the Second World War. Scottish beasts, then, can come in many shapes and sizes. Some are nearly forgotten in the cultural changes of time, but others may still be there, waiting their opportunity to return. To that end, don't forget to like and subscribe and press the wee bell notification. And a huge big thank you to all my subscribers and patrons. See you next week. Bye bye.